Well, today, 7 Washington counties are moving into phase 2 of reopening.
Right now, we're going to take a look at who this affects exactly this morning. So it covers the counties in the West and Puget Sound regions, which is basically about half of Washington's population. Restrictions will ease up in both of those regions. So what that means is this: a maximum of 5 people from outside a person's home can now gather inside. Restaurants, gyms, and movie theaters can reopen at 25% capacity, and some high school sports are going to make a return. Right now, Southwest Washington is still in phase 1, but recently Governor Jay Inslee did lower the state's metrics, making it easier for regions to move to phase 2. So they only have to meet 3 now of the following metrics: a 2-week decrease in new cases, hospitalizations, ICU occupancy, and positive test results.
Oregon State University researchers say they've found multiple variants of the COVID virus here in Oregon, including that highly contagious UK strain. They used wastewater samples and genetic sequencing to find these variants. In addition to the one from the UK, researchers found another variant that's been spreading in Southern California. It doesn't have the mutation that makes the other variations more contagious. Regardless, though, it is more important than ever before to take safety precautions.
With these new variants on our doorstep, Oregonians need to really double down on their personal protective measures. Wear a mask, ideally 2 of them, when you're in contact with people outside your family. Wash your hands, socially distance, no indoor groups, and especially if you have the chance to take the vaccine, get it.
Such good advice. So far, OSU researchers have completed genetic sequencing on more than 1,000 samples from around the state. There are also questions about how well current COVID testing can detect those new variants. Jason Puckett takes that on in this morning's Verify.
We're talking about tests for COVID-19 today and whether they'll work on new strains of the virus. So why are we verifying this? Well, 2 new strains of the virus have been identified in the U.S., one from South Africa and one from Brazil. And viewer Vicky H. asked us if the existing tests would still detect the new strains of COVID. So let's find out. Our sources are the CDC and Dr. Stuart Ray, a professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Ray explained that, quote, the diagnostic tests currently in use seem to detect these newer variants so far. The CDC explains further that current PCR tests have multiple targets to detect the virus, so even if a mutation causes a new strain, the tests will still work. So yes, if you have a new strain, the test will show positive for COVID. But Dr. Ray explained that they won't tell you which strain of the virus you have because, quote, sequencing of the virus to determine what variant it is remains relatively uncommon, end quote. So back to the question. Will current diagnostic tests still detect new COVID-19 strains? Right now, the answer is yes. Our experts said that the diagnostic tests are still working, but they're continuing to test them on new strains in case that changes. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.
All right, let's get to 3 things to know about COVID right now. Number 1, here's where things stand with the variants in the U.S. The one from the UK has already been found in at least 24 states, including Oregon and Washington. Health officials say it could become the dominant variant by March. The second came from Brazil and has been reported in Minnesota, and the latest strain is from South Africa. So far, cases have only been reported in South Carolina and Maryland. Number 2, folks who visited a chemist salon recently may have been exposed to COVID and should quarantine. Skamania County and Clark County health officials haven't been able to ID and notify those people. So if you visited Stellar Hair Design in Camas between 10 and 7 o'clock on January 19th through the 23rd or the 26th, you are considered at risk. And number 3, this week, masks will now be required in airports, on commercial aircraft, trains, and all other forms of public transportation. The CDC order will not make wearing one a violation of federal law. That could make it easier for flight attendants and others to enforce. The only exceptions are for travelers younger than 2 and those with certain medical conditions. And those are your 3 things to know.
A team of COVID experts from the World Health Organization is getting to work in Wuhan, China to investigate how exactly the pandemic began. So yesterday, the World Health Organization got access to the market that's been linked to some of those first cases in China. There wasn't a whole lot to see there, though, because the market was emptied out and sanitized a long time ago. While they're there, experts also want to visit hospitals that treated some of the early cases, and they also want to visit the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Theories, that is, have suggested that the virus was linked from the high security lab there.
Try and get to every important lab that was involved in the early stages of the outbreak. If the evidence is there, we will follow it.
The field work in Wuhan will wrap up in about 10 days. Here in the U.S., President Biden will meet with 10 Senate Republicans pitching a new COVID relief plan. Those Republicans are offering $600 billion in aid, which is significantly less than the president's plan because he wants nearly $2 trillion. The senators say their relief plan can win bipartisan support. The plan has the same money for vaccinations, but nearly 90% less to reopen schools. And stimulus checks would also drop to $1,000.
Today, Oregon's new law goes into effect decriminalizing the possession of all illegal drugs. It removes criminal penalties for low-level drug possession charges and replaces them with a $100 fine, which could be waived if the person seeks treatment. Oregon is the first state in the nation to decriminalize drugs, but it is important to clarify this does not legalize them. Well, when you go into downtown Portland, you see a lot of trash and graffiti. Requests to remove it are actually up 300%, Nina, in just the last year.
Yeah, it's bad. So according to a recent survey, the vast majority of business owners downtown say graffiti and vandalism are very much having an impact on their business.
The quantity of trash that you're seeing around in the areas is a little bit alarming. You just have no idea where it's coming from, what's in there, and what can be growing. I mean, it's, you know, the rats, the different things that happen.
As for why the trash is piling up, well, homelessness, the pandemic closing businesses and quiet streets attracting crime, and the riots and protests. And while requests for the city to clean things up are up dramatically, the budget is not. The Office of Community and Civic Life, which cleans graffiti, says it's asked for an additional $500,000 just to keep up. That would double their current budget, but that could take months. In the meantime, the city has been moving money from other programs as a stopgap. It's also started clearing more homeless camps, and in the process, crews are cleaning up more trash than ever.
This morning, we're following up with people in the small town of Detroit, Oregon. Almost 5 months after wildfires tore through, many residents are still waiting to rebuild. Drive through the town and you'll see there are only a few buildings left standing. People just got electricity a month ago, but they still don't have running water. And the mayor says it could be at least another month before it's back.
We have a temporary treatment facility coming up that we've purchased coming from Utah. As soon as that can get here, they'll do that and hopefully be able to get water in.
Right now, there are only 25 people who've come back to Detroit, and many of them are getting water from tanks they have on their property.
Loose ball to Lillard. A three for the win.
Oh my goodness. You gotta be kidding me.
No, we're not kidding. We're not kidding you. If you're a Blazers fan, you probably didn't miss this on Saturday night. But if you're just a casual fan and you did miss it, we want to show it to you again. Lillard hit that three-pointer Saturday night against Chicago, taking the Blazers from a 2-point deficit to a 1-point win, 123-122 the final. Dame had 44 points altogether on Saturday to go with 9 assists. And not just that three-pointer, but he also hit a three-pointer about 9 seconds earlier when the Blazers were down 5. So, Rod, if you're trying to keep track there in the Weather Center, Blazers down 5 with 9 seconds to go. The man hits 2 three-pointers, 2 threes to give them the win.